I used teak oil, and even though it felt like it took hours, which it did, I did get in a good upper body workout. The slats in the folding chairs were a pain, but I really tried to oil all the parts of the chairs for longevity. I know I can store them when not in use, but I'm at a point in my life where I just want to use what I have when I want to without dragging things in and out of the house, if possible. I do have wicker chairs for around my table, and I do store those when not in use because they're lightweight and easy to carry. And I do the same for my umbrellas. I have a terrible track record with umbrellas taking flight and breaking that we won't talk about, except to say that I don't think I'm a slow learner, but clearly I put more trust in umbrella stands than I probably should have. Lesson learned. I really just wanted a low maintenance, rustic, plain table that would always be there ready to use whenever I wanted. So I very badly built the most basic top with pressure treated 1x4s. I actually love having something that doesn't require a lot of maintenance, and the fact that it looks somewhat poorly made, which it is, and almost neglected, makes it easier for me to really enjoy using it any way I want without worrying about ruining something expensive. The other project I had to work on was the garden, and there were a lot of components to getting the garden ready for planting this year. I had made two beds from leftover 4x4 frames on the outside of the garden, so those would require fencing to keep the chickens and wildlife out of them. And it took me a while to get the right pieces of leftover chicken wire and hardware cloth to fit those beds, but the garden itself was more complicated. In previous years, I had fenced around each individual garden bed, but I just found it was so difficult to set up, maintain, and then remove it, so I just gave up that beast. This year, I had prepared hugelkulture beds from timber that had been cut down on the property. Each bed was lined with cardboard and then filled over the winter months with smaller branches and twigs, leaves, compost, decomposed chicken manure, and fresh bags of garden soil. And instead of fencing each bed, I set out to fence off the entire garden, at no cost, using only what I had on hand. I used all of the leftover chicken wire I had and stapled it to the outside of the split rail fencing to close off that lower section. But my hens can easily clear the split rail fence. And they can be really determined and stubborn when they see all the beautiful colors growing in the garden. And because of their weight, if they can't jump through the fencing, they'll jump up to the top rail and then hop down into the garden from there. So I simply needed to remove any landing platform and further block the airspace above. So I gathered small saplings, which I placed vertically as posts, and then collected a lot of branches that I wove horizontally, crisscrossed, to create a confusing tangle of twigs that the hens would be unable to navigate. When it was all done, it was time for the chicken test. Right away, a couple of the hens tried to fly up and over, but they quickly gave up when they could not find a solid landing surface or space to get through. They looked so confused for many days after that, but my problem was solved. Plus, I really liked the rustic look it gave my already very rustic garden. Now that the garden was enclosed and secure, it was time to begin planting the beds. I like to use the companion planting method, where each plant provides a benefit to the plant next to it, creating a symbiotic relationship. I try to use lower growing plants that need more shade around the base of taller plants that require more sun, so each plant receives what it needs. First were all the plants from the greenhouse that were quickly outgrowing their pots. The cucumbers went in with an already existing trellis, and when I plant the tomato plants, I wait until late in the day or early evening when the sun has lost its heat so they can settle in overnight, which helps to reduce the wilting and shock. Plus, I use a technique that has worked really well for me for years. I plant the tomatoes sideways so that their roots have the ability to put out additional roots along the entire stem for a really sturdy plant. And then I water in Epsom salts. And then I'll do that again a few weeks later to give them the magnesium they require. I needed to install a small trellis in this bed and spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how best to use the last piece of hardware cloth. After much deliberation, I finally created a curved trellis. That's fun, just that I can step into the shade. planted this bed with sugar snap peas, 2 varieties of carrots, and some beets. In other beds, I planted spinach, kale, lettuces, turnips, more beets, a couple of eggplants, and the giant Marconi peppers I had started in the greenhouse. And in between, there were herbs such as basil, dill, sage, cilantro, and parsley. I also planted marigolds everywhere I can fit them in.